Good morning, and thank you for joining the City of Tampa for this Recovery and Rebuilding Virtual Town Hall. I'm Whit Remer, the Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the City of Tampa. We know it's been a challenging few weeks for the region, and many homeowners and businesses are making tough decisions on their rebuilding and recovering options. The city's goal is to provide accurate information and available resources to assist with this recovery process. Over the last few days, we polled the community and asked you to submit your questions that you'd like answered live today. Our panelists, who we'll introduce in just a moment, will work to answer those questions. Importantly, we're not able to answer questions about specific insurance claims, the insurance process, or damage to your home or business. However, if you have additional questions that remain unanswered, please use the chat feature in Teams and we'll work to answer those live at the last 15 or 20 minutes of the program. Joining us today is J.C. Hudgison, Chief Building Official for the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County Property Appraiser Bob Henriquez, and Angie Odell, Mitigation Manager from the Florida Division of Emergency Management. Without further ado, I'll introduce J.C. Hudgison with the City of Tampa Building Department.
Good morning. I'm J.C. Hudgison, Chief Building Official for the City of Tampa. In the aftermath of the hurricanes, we understand that many properties in our community have sustained damage. To support residents and subcontractors and contractors in the recovery process, I'm here to outline the necessary steps for obtaining a permit to repair and rebuild safely. Based on the Florida Building Code, certain minor repairs do not require a building permit. These include installing a new roof or re-roofing an existing roof that is 500 square feet or less, interior finish work like painting, tiling, carpeting, cabinetry, and countertops, repair or replacement of fences, and soffit and fascia repairs. That means that any work like this can be performed at any time and a permit is not required. To ease the repair process, per the emergency order, additional minor repairs that do not require a building permit at this time have been approved. This includes drywall repairs 2 feet or less from the finished floor and replacement of exterior doors. Our intent is to make sure that you can secure your property as other repairs are ongoing. To further support our residents, the city is waiving building permit fees for certain types of repairs directly related to the storm damage from either Hurricane Helene or Hurricane Milton. On the screen is the designation in the seller to waive the fee for the work being performed. If you click yes, then the fees will be removed from the permit. Staff is equipped with post-storm damage assessment software to verify the claims and help waive fees. As of this morning, we've issued almost 300 permits related to storm damage, 29 building permits, 201 trade permits, 6 tree permits, and 1 demolition permit. To facilitate the rebuilding process, the city is offering expedited permit review and inspections for all types of storm damage repairs. In referencing a question about prioritizing and timing, when applying, please include storm damage in the permitting record to ensure priority handling by staff. Citizens also have access to Queue Up Tampa, an online tool that offers virtual appointments for permits and plan review consultations. From your home, you can schedule an appointment and have CSD assist in making sure you are applying for the correct permit. Please scan the QR code for more information. Specific trade permits are required for storm damage activities, such as roof repair over 500 square feet, any electrical work related to storm damage, garage door replacement, HVAC mechanical changeouts, and hot water heater replacements. There was a question about the time to get a permit. Tampa Construction Services trade permits can be issued same day to get you back into your homes. Please note, if you plan to perform the work yourself, you will need to sign the owner-builder acknowledgement form. More extensive work that includes structural repair will require a building permit. That may be an alterations permit and potentially any demolition permits. CSD staff has been tasked to prioritize these repair permits and will continue to do so to aid in recovery. If your property is within a designated flood hazard area, you will need to submit a FEMA substantial improvement form for permits, and we will discuss that in a few slides. Why get a permit? There are several reasons you need to get a permit for the work being performed. Safety assurance. Permits ensure that structural repairs are inspected and meet safety standards, reducing the risk of future failures or hazards. Code compliance. Building codes are updated to reflect safer building practices, and permits ensure repairs adhere to the latest standards. Insurance claims. Many insurance companies require permits and inspections as proof of proper repairs for claim processing. Property value protection. Permitted and inspected work can protect the long-term value of the property, ensuring it meets recognized safety standards. And legal requirements. Working without a permit can result in issues during property resale, as the new statute states that sellers must complete a flood disclosure form before executing a residential sales contract. Now to flood-resistant development. One important guideline to be aware of is the 50% rule. Today, I want to provide some clarity around the concept of substantial damage, which applies specifically to properties within designated flood zones. So let's start off with the National Flood Insurance Program. The NFIP, administered by FEMA, offers flood insurance to protect properties in flood-prone areas. Through its Community Rating System, or CRS, the NFIP recognizes communities that go above and beyond minimum flood protection standards. The higher a community CRS rating, the larger the discount residents receive on their flood insurance. Here in Tampa, our efforts to exceed flood protection standards have earned us a Category 5 rating in the CRS. As a result, our residents can save up to 25% on their flood insurance policies. The following information is how the City of Tampa does the substantial damage evaluation. Other cities have NFIP and CRS ratings with general model ordinances, but each jurisdiction evaluates differently. This is for the City of Tampa only. So the definition of substantial damage is defined as the damage of any cause, such as natural disaster, where the cost to restore the structure to its pre-damage condition equals or exceeds the 50% of the building's market value prior to the damage. This definition is set through the Florida Building Code, and it aligns with FEMA guidelines. For properties located in a special flood hazard area categorized as VE or AE zones, owners are required to submit a substantial damage form when applying for certain repair permits. This process ensures that rebuilt structures meet current standards for safety and flood resistance. So for clarity, if you're in a Zone X on the flood maps, you are not required to provide a substantial damage form to obtain a building permit. How do you know what zone you're in? Let me introduce you to Forerunner. Since 2023, the City of Tampa has been utilizing Forerunner software, which provides comprehensive flood plan data for properties online. The software enables residents to access critical information such as their flood zone designation, flood elevations, and even depreciated value of their homes imported from the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser site. Please scan the QR code to access the map and see your flood information. Please see the form on the screen to the right. This is a copy of the substantial damage form that we use to assess the properties. When using this form, you as the owner are responsible for the white area. Fill out all of that information to include the square footage, ownership, and all that information. Then you apply $64.85 for the square foot of construction. That is the flat number that we use to assess the property. Then you choose other under storm damage, so we know specifically that this is related to a storm damage permit. So then the formula is calculating the cost of construction value times the square footage of the damage, which provides you the cost of construction. To be clear, the cost of construction must be less than 60% of the structure's depreciated value based on the Hillsborough County's appraiser, or 50% if using a certified appraisal of the structure. I placed the QR code on the page that will take you to the substantial damage form on our website. So unfortunately, if you exceed the threshold, you have two options. You may be required to either elevate your home to meet the current flood standards, or in some cases, consider demolition and rebuilding. These options, while challenging, are necessary to comply with floodplain management regulations and to ensure long-term safety and resilience of our community. Why is this important for Tampa? The importance of substantial damage reporting is compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program requirement. Communities participating in NFIP must enforce FEMA substantial damage regulations. These help manage risk and keep residents eligible for federal flood insurance. Protecting property and lives. Substantial damage determinations ensure that heavily damaged buildings are either brought up to current codes and floodplain standards or built more resiliently. Access to federal funding and assistance. Completing these forms can make property owners eligible for federal disaster assistance, grants, or low-interest loans to help with rebuilding. Reducing long-term costs. Rebuilding to current standards can prevent repetitive loss and save homeowners money on future repairs and insurance premiums. And finally, community resilience. Substantial damage assessments contribute to a community's overall resilience, ensuring that properties are rebuilt to better withstand future natural disasters. I also wanted to speak on trees on private property. We've received many calls with how to address and what is needed. So the trees fall into two categories, fallen trees or damaged trees. For fallen trees, these trees have been uprooted as a result of the hurricane, and they present an unacceptable risk to persons or property and may be removed without requiring a permit or planting of mitigation trees. This applies to all properties in the city, single-family, multifamily, non-residential. And the other category is damaged trees. If the extent of the damage is caused by hurricane results in the tree presenting an unacceptable risk, there is already a state law providing that a permit is not required to prune, trim, or remove the tree, so long as the property owner possesses appropriate documentation from a certified arborist. In addition, during this period, the city will also waive the permitting fee and mitigation requirements for the pruning, trimming, or removal of any tree damaged by the hurricane to the extent it presents a risk to property in the city, provided that before the tree is pruned, trimmed, or removed, the property owner provides an appropriate documentation from a certified arborist or a city arborist, inspects and concurs with the tree possessing that risk. The city will not charge for property owners for this inspection. And lastly, I wanted to leave you with the contact information for construction services if you have any additional questions. We are available to provide the information you need, as our goal is to streamline the process and support you through every step as efficiently as possible as we seek to maintain our community's long-term resilience. And now, I'll hand it over to Hillsborough County Property Appraiser, Bob Henriquez. Bob?
Well, good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the City of Tampa for providing the opportunity for me to present today, and JC, thank you as well. And for the folks that are joining us here this morning, or anyone that might be watching in terms of on a replay, I appreciate you joining us, and hopefully this will be informational for you. I'm Bob Henriquez. I'm your Hillsborough County Property Appraiser, and it's important for folks to understand what we do at the office, the Property Appraiser's office, and what we don't do. So this is a great opportunity for us to provide information to you here today. First of all, the role of the Property Appraiser's Office in the damage assessment process. First of all, in the immediate aftermath of an event like the two tragic events we had within the last few weeks, are to assist local agencies, and we did that. We were on the ground with code enforcement and others to do the initial damage assessment for the designation, federal designations, and what have you. Collecting that damage information allows us to determine whether property owners are eligible for various forms of property tax relief provided under Florida law that we'll touch on here during my presentation, and then answer any questions that folks may have. We also provide property owners an estimate of the just market value and information related to the 50% rule that JC just spoke about. And we'll go into some depth about that. And also we also advise property owners of potential, and we're getting a lot of these questions currently, of the potential impact to their property value as a result of these storms going forward when they begin to repair and rebuild their property. Now, we know that these historic events, these two storms, were catastrophic in nature and affected nearly every property owner, every citizen in Hillsborough County and the City of Tampa. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to really ramp up our outreach efforts to make sure folks had the information necessary to be able to address from the standpoint of their property value any questions they may have, and also to apply for any help or questions about rebuilding and repairing their home. So many of you may have received literally within the last day or so a card from my office that has information on it regarding those issues. We have our website there, hcpafl.org. You can also, we have a dedicated email address, stormdamage@hcpafl.org. And of course, our phone number, that's a dedicated line for folks to answer questions that you may have, 813-272-6332. There's a QR code on that as well that allows you to go directly in to be able to report damage that you may have. So let's talk a little bit about rebuilding and repairing from the standpoint of our office and how it piggybacks City of Tampa as well. So first of all, questions have come to us, and I believe we have a question we'll answer about what if my home is uninhabitable? And so state law allows for a tax rebate would be available for you for, in this case, the 2024 property taxes, should your home be uninhabitable for 30 days or more during 2024. The homeowner would fill out a DR 465 form with our office, the property appraiser's office, and supply the necessary documentation documenting the fact that the home is uninhabitable and that you're out of the home. As far as 2025 value for the property, that's going to be based on the condition of the property as of January 1st, 2025. So if the property is still uninhabitable, of course, then the vacant land would probably be the basis for most of the value. But we can answer those questions as going forward as well. Next question people will ask about, well, I'm a homesteaded piece of property, or I have a Save Our Homes cap, so that my taxable value can't go up more than 3% in any given year, or in inflation, whichever is less. Or perhaps I'm covered by a 10% non-homestead cap that again, only allows my taxable value to go up no more than 10% in any given year. So if you're a property owner and you've been damaged and you need to rebuild the property, state law allows you to build up to 110% of the pre-event size of the property. So in other words, if you had a 160 square foot home with heated area of 1,600 square foot home pre-event with a homestead cap of say $195,000, the owner could rebuild up to 1,760 square feet, and that cap would remain at $195,000. So in other words, they would not be penalized for those additional square feet. Now, should they decide to rebuild and add additional square footage, then let's say in the case that they had the 1,600 square feet home pre-event with a homestead cap of, again, $195,000, the owner decides to rebuild 2,170 square feet, so they've added an additional 410 square feet. Well, those 410 square feet would be added on top of the existing cap, and that's really no different than if you had chosen to add improvements to your home today, and then when we reevaluate the value of the home January 1st, 2025, we would add that. So if you added a pool or an addition or something like that, it would be considered on top of the cap as new construction. The next question that really is coming in, so what if as a result of the 50% rule, or if I decided on my own to elevate the flooded property or the home to make it more resilient for the future? And so in that case, we will consider, again, the 110% rule would apply in terms of additional square footage, but we will consider the heated square footage as under that 110% rule. So if you decided, as long as you did not finish out or add additional square footage from the standpoint of heated square footage, then we would not count that against you for that additional 10% or the 110% rule. So again, in the examples that we have or the pictures you'd see, so if you elevated the home, again, in an effort to be, first of all, friendly to the property owners in terms of their taxable value and just market value, as well as encouraging folks and not discouraging them from making their homes more resilient. So in the examples that we have here, you can see that they raised the home, but underneath is unfinished. So again, JC spoke a little bit to the 50% rule. Our role as the property appraiser's office, simply for the purposes of substantial damage determinations for FEMA, the federal program, estimates the market value of the structures can be determined in two ways, and this is important for folks to know. The first and most accurate option is to use a Florida licensed or certified real estate appraiser. So if you have the wherewithal and are able to do that, it's likely that estimate may give you more wiggle room in terms of the 50% rule than necessarily ours. But secondly, you can use the property appraiser's office. Now, we have no role in issuing building permits or determining flood zones. Our values are simply for the purposes of property tax purposes, but you could use our depreciated just market value that we can provide to you. Along those lines, what we've done is actually provide a 50% rule calculator on our website that's live today. So if you'd like to go in, put in your identifying information, as you can see on the slide, your folio number or your address, it's intuitive, so it should auto-populate for you. From that, then it will generate a letter that you can have available to you to provide to to any agency or insurance agency or whoever you may need to provide that to. And on that letter, it's going to give you a value, the overall value of the structure as of January 1st, 2024, and then 50% of that being the cost and repairs improvement considered by FEMA to be substantially improved. So that's something that you're able to do. You could call us, we can provide that to you personally, or you can go on the website and try to download that yourself. Finally, again, here's our contact information. The main number of our office is 813-272-6100, 6100. Again, we have a storm damage hotline. That's 813-272-6332. So those folks are specifically tasked to answer questions specific to storm damage. So that might cut down the time a little bit. And we also have a storm damage email, which is stormdamage@hcpafl.org. We stand ready to help you in any possible way. I can assure you from the property appraiser's office, we are going to do everything we can to be property owner friendly. Some of the questions we've had, unfortunately, are folks that are afraid necessarily to report their damage or to let us know because they think in some way it's going to negatively affect their property value from the standpoint of raising their taxes. That's in no way our goal, our charge, or our philosophy. We want to help you in any way that we can. And wherever we can, we're going to make sure that we're going to make call balls and strikes on the side of the property owner. So with that, let me turn over the presentation to Angie Odell. She is the mitigation manager for the Florida Department of Emergency Management in Tallahassee. And then I'll stand ready to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for joining us here today.
Good morning, I'm Angie Odell. I'm the State Mitigation Planning Manager here at Florida Division of Emergency Management. I'm going to briefly talk on some mitigation grants and some of the things that you guys would be eligible for and as to what your next steps would be. So I know that Nicole Van Loveren said to please tell us about any grants or find funds to elevate homes above the flood levels. So I'm going to go into the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. This is a federal program. However, the goal is to assist in implementing those long-term hazard mitigation measures following a major disaster declaration. I want to emphasize that the period of performance for this grant is roughly around 3 years, so this is not a quick and easy process for residents. It does require a large amount of documentation on your guys' behalf, so you will have to have some of those things. It is also a cost reimbursement grant. Therefore, that means that FEMA will cover 75% of it on the federal side, and the homeowner would be responsible for the 25% non-federal side. The allocation does come from 20% of federal disaster assistance for the disaster, and then we have it written in Florida Administrative Code 27P-22 that we have a 3-tier system to make sure that those high impact counties do receive the funding first before other counties that were not impacted. For the eligible applicants, a homeowner cannot apply for this on their own, so it has to go through state, local governments, and certain private nonprofits. This is kind of a general timeline as to how HMGP works. You can see with the disaster declaration, we have that. We generally publish the notice of funding availability within 120 days of post-declaration once we get notification from FEMA as to how much we would be receiving as a state on a temporary basis. And then we open up the application to counties, local governments, and tribals and certain nonprofits for a 90-day application period. This is all written within the 27P-22 Florida Administrative Code. And then after we have our application period closed, we do spend that 12 months of reviewing applications on behalf of FEMA to make sure that they are complete and correct so that we can move through FEMA's process as quickly as possible. And then after it has been awarded, your project has been awarded, we start going through the contract process, and then that's when construction can start. I want to emphasize that construction cannot start until we have everything, the contract is done. It is not based on if you do construction and you get reimbursement later. You have to wait until it's actually underneath contract to start that construction. I know Julie Smart asked if there's any grants that are available for those that have been flooded and do not have flood insurance. And this would be one of those grants that you can apply, go through your local governments to be able to apply for. Shin Mao also asked as to if there was their property was designated by FEMA as a severe repetitive loss property. This will also include repetitive loss properties for this. So the available types of grants that are available for it is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Grant Program. The goal for this is to reduce or eliminate those claims underneath the NFIP, right, by reducing or eliminating the risk of repetitive flood damage to those insured buildings and structures. This generally does apply to repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss properties. It is another cost reimbursement grant. Again, construction and everything I said about HMGP as far as going through the process still stands. However, the cost reimbursement is a little different for repetitive loss properties, whereas 90% is covered by FEMA and then 10% is having to be covered by the homeowner. For severe repetitive loss properties, FEMA covers this 100%. It is nationally competitive, but we do have an annual appropriation by Congress to every state within the United States. Again, you will have to go through your state and local government. Nonprofit organization and individuals and businesses do need to apply through the local government for this. This is a general timeline. It looks a lot like the HMGP timeline. We just don't have to have a disaster. We just have to have FEMA open up the application period for it. So it still goes through a review process and a request for information from us at the state to the local governments of making sure that we have all of that documentation before we submit it to FEMA. And then once we submit it to FEMA, FEMA also reviews and awards them. Again, once you start getting the award, we can start the contract process and then you can start the construction process thereafter. Again, to make sure that everybody understands to go through these, it is not a quick and easy process. It's 2 to 3 years before you can start the construction. And these are FEMA federal guidelines. And that concludes from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So we will now begin the live question and answer portion of the program. For our first question, Amy asked, my house is in a flood zone in South Tampa. Do we need to apply for a permit if we're replacing the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical in the home? And does a contractor need to complete the substantial improvement worksheet to calculate that work that complies with the 50% rule? JC?
Yes, you do need permits. You can get those through the trade permits. So whether if it's electrical, if you're hiring an electrical contractor to do electrical work, if you're hiring a plumbing contractor to do plumbing, or mechanical to fix your AC. So you can do them separately as a trade, or you can do them all together as a BLD alterations permit. The applicant, but the owner needs to fill out the substantial document form. The owner has to fill that part out. So you can print that off, the contractor can provide it to you, we can email it to you, but the owner of the property has to fill out the substantial damage form.
Thank you, JC. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the owner builder permit process?
So in this state that any owner can perform property improvements on residential properties. So as long as they're willing to understand that role in being an active person on the job site, to be, working with the subcontractors or whoever to perform the work, the owner can do the work themselves as well. So obviously the owner builder acknowledgement form just walks you through all of those steps, that you acknowledge that you are taking that responsibility, that you acknowledge that you are a part of this permitting process. Any violations could potentially fall under your ownership. So it's more or less a declaration letting them know the responsibilities of taking that on instead of hiring the general contractor.
Thanks, JC. On the substantial improvement question, is this just the structure, or does substantial improvement also triggered by electrical, plumbing, AC, and water heater related work?
Can you say that again?
To calculate substantial improvement, is that just structural improvement, or does it also include electrical, plumbing, and HVAC work?
It's all of it. So that square foot number, it is per the square foot. So in that square foot, if it's cabinetry, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, it works in there for you, for your favor. It actually works out better that you use that. So it's outside of the structures. Anything in the work area would be considered as a part of the determination.
JC, we have a lot of questions related to the permit timeline and process. Greg asked, how does the city plan to address the influx of permits? I know you mentioned at the top of the hour you guys have had about 200 permits related to the storm. Do you have any additional information on timelines and staff capacity to process these permits?
So what we're doing right now is we ask for you in your scope of work to put in storm damage. If you put in storm damage, that prioritizes that above the other permits that are coming in. We're trying to balance about 60-40, focusing 60% on repair and recovery, because I know I'll get calls from other builders about what about my project that's not in the flood. So that 40%, we're still balanced to try to work on the consistent projects to keep those projects going. So the intent is our normal 3-day review time. All of that is still the same. 7 to 10. Most of this stuff we're dealing with, you know, carports, things like that. These are very small projects that don't take long. So obviously we're prioritizing. We're staffed up. We're available. We're here to help. And we just want to be able to get to those projects as soon as you can, so obviously you can get back into your homes.
Are there any fast track options available for complete demos and rebuilds, or people that are wanting to come into compliance?
So it's easier for an in-person consultation when you come in and kind of lay this all out. And you say, hey, this is what I want to do. We can kind of give you the process. So whether if you want to fast track some of your trade permits while you're waiting on a structural to do your roof repair, so we can work with you and sit down with you and kind of come up with a phasing plan. So we have that. We also have our Queue Up Tampa. You can do a virtual appointment. You don't even have to come see us. You can just set up virtually, and we can have similar to a FaceTime message, and we go through a Teams meeting, and we go through all the information with you and lay it out. And you can, you know, even turn your camera and show us, hey, in my house, this is what I'm seeing in my bedroom, or this is what I have in my kitchen, and we'll be able to give you that information and help you out.
All right, thanks, JC. We'll come back to you in a couple minutes with some additional questions. Bob, we've got a couple of questions for you. Let's start with what defines whether a home is actually uninhabitable?
Well, I mean, clearly that would be a decision. I mean, if the home is, the damage is sufficient that you know, that it was a life or health or safety issue of staying in the home, then that decision would be made. They would provide that, the information of how, you know, how damaged it was, and then and basically they're going to give us the information of where they're having to stay as a result of that. We wouldn't make the determination exactly of what is considered uninhabitable from the property appraiser's office, but I think it's somewhat intuitive of what that may be, and honestly, you know, we wouldn't want people living or staying in a home that for some reason is some kind of a health or safety risk as well.
Thanks, Bob. I've got a question from Jonathan. He says there's been a lot of sketchy information floating around about property tax relief related to the storms. I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but can you just remind us what the ground truth, the tax implications on homes that were damaged, and what the city, and this will probably be for JC, what the city's doing to help keep people in their homes and to bolster the value of properties in the wake of hurricanes?
Well, it's important for folks to understand the role of the property appraiser's office. We value property based on the market. We don't control the market. We don't predict the market. We don't. We're historians, for lack of a better term. The value is based when you receive your notice of proposed taxes or your trim notice in August of each year. It's based on the previous January 1. And so, in a case like this, where there's been damage to a home, certainly it's had an effect on the value. Over the course of time, what the market bears is what the value of the home will be going forward. At the same time, there's no intention or effort on our part, or I think anyone's part, to utilize a catastrophic event like this to somehow do something that's going to be detrimental to the property owners, just the opposite. And so I think there's a lot of that information out there. I literally had a call within a day or so of the personal call from somebody I knew that had talked to one of their friends that said, I know that I'm supposed to report this damage, but I don't want to because it's gonna have a negative effect. My taxes are gonna go up as a result of that. The legislature has wisely, I believe, put some statutes into place that in the past, whenever there was an event of one type or another, and whether it be a hurricane, a series of tornadoes, or something else that's gone on, in which they've had to go into special session to address some of the things they've put into statute now. The 110% rule is one of those things that they would do sort of on a one-off basis that's now in statute. So that allows you, again, to rebuild the property up to 110% of its original size without it having an effect on your Save Our Homes cap or the 10% non-homestead cap from the standpoint of value. That's a good thing for property owners. Now, clearly, if you're going to add an additional square footage as a result of that, that's no different than if there were no event and you decided to add a pool in addition to your home or whatever. That's going to go on the cap, on top of the cap, your Save Our Homes cap in the case of a homesteaded property in the first year. Or if you had a business or some other non-homesteaded property you decided to add on to it, that's no different than the way that we look at property each and every year. So that's one thing. The fact that if it's uninhabitable, one of the things, thank you for the question, Whit, that I did not touch on is that you have up to 5 years if you determine that you're going to return to the home or rebuild the home, because as Ms. Odell spoke to, it could take a while for all of this to play out between the declarations, all of the different programs that are out there, rebuilding, permitting, although you guys are going to do it in 3 days, right, JC? All those things that take time, so we know so the law allows you up to 5 years as long as you're taking affirmative steps in terms of rebuilding without your homestead exemption coming off. So that's a good thing as well. If you determine that you're not going to return or you're going to sell the property, you still have up to 3 tax years, the remainder of this year and 2 more years to do your portability if you have homestead as well. So those things are still in place, as well. And the one thing that we're going to make sure is that if you decide to proactively elevate your home so that you're not affected like this in the future, then we're only going to count that heated, or in our case, more importantly, air conditioned area in Florida. Again, as far as that 110% rule, if you elevate your home, then we're going to consider that basically foundation below you, as long as it's unfinished. Now, again, if you decide to finish that area out, then we'll look at it the same way as if you did in addition to your home on top of the cap.
Bob, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know Maureen asked if she elevated her home as a stilt home, or where I think you could probably pull a car into an open space below. She just wanted to confirm that additional underneath square footage wouldn't count towards adding additional conditioned square footage.
Yes, Maureen, and that's a very good question. Our office, again, is going to interpret catastrophic damage to the structure as addressing heated and air-conditioned areas. Now, there may be some question if we're instructed by the Department of Revenue or otherwise that that's not the correct way to do it. That wouldn't be on us, but we're going to take, again, as helpful an approach as we can. And I think we don't want to create disincentives for folks that are going to make their homes or properties more resilient in the case of another event like we experienced.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to ask you to stay up for 1 minute. I just want to make an important administrative announcement that this program will be available online. It's being recorded, so for those that aren't on the video portion, you can go back and review the slides, and for folks that were not able to make the presentation at all today, it'll be available on the city's media outlets. Bob, I've got another question here for you. If we used a licensed real estate appraiser and the number comes back higher than the one on your website, how would that impact our property taxes?
Well, that's not going to affect our assessment. Unless you decided to supply that to us and say that we've got you under assessed. But it's apples and oranges. Remember that assessment would be more contemporary than ours would be, because ours is based on January 1st of 2024. So the market changes over the course of time. So time trending, if the market has increased, which it has every year since 2013 to some extent, then intuitively that number should be higher than ours. And also remember, we do our assessments for property tax purposes, whereas an assessment from a private appraiser, again, is usually a smaller universe. I can go into the whole thing, but the reality of it is, it probably is, and we would encourage folks to get an assessment from a private appraiser, simply because it should be advantageous to them from the standpoint of the 50% rule. But we're not going to then go back and say, oh, well, that we have our assessment wrong. It's just the opposite. Also, at the same time, go to our website. We download that form or that letter, and if you're within the 50% rule based on our assessment, then you're good to go.
Thanks, Bob. Mike asked if you have a two-car garage and you plan on adding an additional garage, does that increase the square footage of the house?
It could, depending. I mean, that's an additional improvement. Now, remember, a garage is different than a heated or air-conditioned area, so those would be, additional features that are that, from a taxable standpoint or a value standpoint, are much less than an area that's finished out for living area. So that could, again, if it's additional square footage. Now, if it's related to the storm and the elevation of the property, and you haven't finished it out, we'd have to, again, I don't want to make a blanket statement because it depends on how you finish it out. If it's unfinished from the standpoint, and maybe JC could speak to what the city considers to be finished and unfinished, then we're not going to count it against that 110% amount of leeway that you have in terms of rebuilding.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, let's bring JC back up. I know we've got a question here about the 50% rule and how it's calculated. You mentioned that there was a 50% threshold and a 60% threshold. Could you just provide some clarity around how each of those are triggered?
So we do the 60% kind of similar to the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser. Because of that date, it was January 1 of that year. We do 60% because, as he mentioned, that market has changed. So ideally, if you want to get a more accurate one, then therefore you can benefit directly from the 50%. If you want to use what's on the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser, it is at the 60% threshold. Most times when we see this, it is advantageous to get a separate appraisal to get that. Ideally, it's and similar to what Bob said as well. We're trying to be as helpful as we can. If we see that you're getting close to that number, another reason why we have free permits, we want you to come in to have that discussion with us. If you help explain us what you're trying to do, we will try to work with you to make sure we're still meeting our FEMA requirements and we're getting you back in your home and we're trying to keep you in the best situation possible.
Thanks, JC. JC, we've got a question from Jay that says, most drywall is sold in 4 feet sections. Why is the city only requiring no permit for up to 2 feet?
So when we did up to 2 feet, we were trying to stay out of electrical services. We were trying to stay out of any other trades. So that's why we did that. Normally, in disaster recovery, it's called a flood cut. You do 2 foot above, that's what it's called. So ServPro, any of those groups that come in, because they're trying not to get into the trades. They're not trying to get into electrical services. They're not trying to get into those things. So that's why we felt that it was safe enough to do the 2 feet or less. If you do 4 feet, if you do it in 4 feet sections, once again, it's still a trade permit that you can come and get for free. So it's not really necessarily hurting you on that end either, because we're waiving the fees for that work. So if you want to do the alterations, you want to do that, that's fine. You come in and get a permit, we'll come and inspect it if it's up to 4 feet.
Thanks, JC. I'll give you a moment to catch your breath. There's a question here about what is our base flood elevation in Tampa. And I think this is a good opportunity to, again, plug the Forerunner program that the city uses to determine all sorts of information related to potential risk with your house, including your flood zone. We know there was a lot of flooding in Tampa during Hurricane Milton that occurred outside the flood zone. So we really encourage people to know their flood zone and understand that just because you don't live in a mandatory purchase area doesn't mean that you don't have risk from flooding. Generally, those risks are higher for inland flooding than coastal flooding. FEMA has done a lot more mapping around the coastal area than inland flooding. But please understand that just because you're not in a mandatory purchase area doesn't mean that there is not any risk at all to your house flooding. It's also important to realize that your flood zone is different than your evacuation zone. There is some relationship, but evacuation zones are based on your distance to the coast. Flood zones are designated both from coastal storm surge risk and inland flooding risk. So very, very important to understand the difference between flood zones and evacuation zones, and also understanding that just because you're not in a mandatory purchase area, so you might be in flood zone X shaded, there still is a risk of flooding there. It's between a 100 and 500-year storm risk, whereas the flood zones closer to the coast or where we know there is inland flooding, those risks would be higher. That looks like we have, we'll give our audience just 1 or 2 more minutes to continue submitting questions. We've got one from Nicole, just reemphasizing the request to elaborate on grant programs. Angie, our understanding is that both the HMGP and the FMA applications must be submitted through a local government or state government. I know the state is contemplating developing some new processes to expedite that process. Angie, are there any developments on who folks after the call should contact for additional information, or if they're interested in pursuing a grant, either FMA or HMGP?
Yeah, for the county of Hillsborough, it would be Hillsborough County Emergency Management, Monica Martin and Troy Salisbury, and I can give those contact information to the city. And for the city of Tampa, I believe it would be for Whit, but I will have to verify with the county as to who on the city side. Not to throw it back at you, Whit, sorry.
No, it's okay. Great. Yeah, we'll develop a process for folks interested in putting together a grant application. But I do want to reemphasize Angie's point that importantly, those grant programs are really intended for folks that want to make their structures more resilient before an event happens. They really are not designed to help make people whole after an event. And that's, I think, indicative of the timeline that it takes, up to 3 years for those grant funds to land. And importantly, that no construction can begin until you are under contract through that process. So folks that are already spending money and want to elevate their homes, they would not be eligible for those grant programs. We've got a question for you, JC, explaining the difference between finished and unfinished space.
The easiest way for that is for a space that is conditioned or non-conditioned. Obviously, if it's a garage, when we're thinking about these flood repairs, that is an area that is not finished, not enclosed. And for a finished garage area, it would be enclosed, garage doors, and a part of the main structure.
Okay, great. We also just want to share that Forerunner is available on the QR codes. We're going to flash those on the screen again.
All right, so first one is for Queue Up Tampa. So if you want the virtual one-on-one with CSD staff to go over information, it's queueup.tampa.gov, or you can scan the QR code. Make sure, even when you're scheduling that appointment, also put in storm damage in that as well, so then we know that that information is related to storm damage recovery. And the other one is for Forerunner. This is the site that has all of our flood maps available online that you can look at any time. It's a public portal. You can type your address in. You can see what those flood risks are and where you fall. And that'll also tell you your elevation plus your design flood, which is 1 foot above that.
Okay, as we wind down our program, we want to remind you that both the slides and the audio portion of this program will be available to the public after the program has finished. If you have additional construction-related questions, please be sure to email CSD, that's Construction Services Division, help, CSD help at tampagov.net. And I think Bob's got an email address that he posted on his slides as well, which will be available after the show. That concludes our program today. Thank you so much for joining the City of Tampa Recovery and Rebuilding Town Hall. If you have additional questions on the grant program side, feel free to reach out to me, Whit, WHIT.Remer @tampagov.net. And thank you so much for joining the city today, and we wish you the best on your recovery and rebuilding. That concludes the program.